NBA draft community, we're back with another 2022 NBA mock draft. This will be another entire full first round. There's been some switch ups, some changes. The Lakers keep losing. Has completely shifted everything here in this mock draft. So if you guys do appreciate the work I put in and also the analysis you find in this video, make sure to leave a like. Also subscribe if you're new. These videos average between 5,000 to 10,000 views, and we have 7,500 subscribers. So if each one of you could hit that subscribe button for us, it would be immense in trying to help grow the channel here. So hopefully more people get to watch these mock drafts, the ones I work really, really hard on. So hopefully you guys do enjoy. Again, thank you for all the support. And if you are new, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would really, really help the channel out a lot. So let's go ahead and get forward here. This mock draft is based on the standings as of March 28th, 2022. So if you're watching this March 30th or maybe, April 1st, whatever day you're watching this, maybe the order has shifted a little tiny bit. It's not that big of a deal. We still have the lottery ahead of us. So don't get too worried if the order is off by one or two things, because the order is based off of March 28th. And more than likely, you're going to be watching this after that day. Moving forward here now. Pick one, I've got the Houston Rockets on the board, and it's a really close race for pick one. Obviously, the Pistons are around, the Magic as well, but as of right now, the time I'm recording this, the Houston Rockets have the number one overall pick by order. Now, of course, the lottery is going to come in and shake everything up, so don't worry about that. But as of right now, pick one, Houston in this mock draft, and I have the Rockets here going with forward Paolo Banchero out of Duke. And yes, huge shakeup from the last few mock drafts. Paolo Banchero had been consistently going fourth for me until March Madness has kind of really shook things up again. He is still playing ahead of the Final Four, and I think he's really helped his draft stock again. So early season, we thought probably going to be the first overall pick, specifically after that Gonzaga Duke game, which was a phenomenal game to watch, by the way, where, Paolo Banchero really made his presence known. And now again in March Madness, he's done it. So a lot of people are going to probably title him with the clutch killer instinct type of traits that you want to have if you're taking a guy first overall. And I think there is some legitimacy to him being the first overall pick just outside of March Madness here. When you look at his skill set, that 6'10", his ability to lull you to sleep and knock down a mid-range J in your mouth, that's, pretty intriguing stuff there for an NBA prospect. And then you also look at his physicality. Defensively, he's actually played very well this year. He can protect the rim a little bit, pretty solid rebounder, uses his body well defensively, and then offensively, good offensive flow to his game. One concern I have is maybe he's a little bit of a ball stopper, but with his talent, offenses are probably going to ask him to stop the ball. They're going to say, hey, we want to give it to you. Go get your 15 to 20 points easy. And then the rest of the offense is going to flow around you. He's a nice mid-post option. And I think really the one concern I have about him is how quick is he? Is he quick enough to be an elite player? And what I mean by that is think about, prime Carmelo Anthony, think about prime LeBron James, prime Luka Doncic, prime James Harden, all the best players in the world, which is what the hope's going to be here for Paolo Banchero, is their capability to beat guys off the dribble, blow by them, get to the rim, suck in, help defenders either kick it out or finish through them. Banchero has the skills to finish through them. The only issue is I don't know if he's going to be able to get by the first line of defense as frequently as some of the other superstars we've seen in the league historically. So even though this is a really strong class, there are some concerns about if there's a true superstar in this class. There might be just a ton of stars, which still makes the class really, really good. I do think there are some concerns holistically about if there's a superstar in here. I actually do think there's a superstar in here, even if it's potentially not Paolo Banchero, but I do think he's going to have a great career, probably average 20 plus points a game very quickly into his career. Houston gets a good player to complement Kevin Porter Jr. and also Jalen Green, who's been playing great basketball as of late. So you're looking at that scoring punch of the guards, and you add another extremely talented scorer here in Paolo Banchero. This offense would become a lot to handle with. And then you look at Alperen Şengün probably being the long-term center there. Christian Wood maybe gets traded this offseason, and Paolo Banchero takes over as the starting forward on day one next season. Number two, we've got the Orlando Magic here now. And the Magic, like the Rockets, are in a boat where if you start a bunch of young guards, you're probably going to lose a lot of games. I've been talking about that on the channel. And it's just really where the trend of the NBA is at right now. Unless you have a mega star like Luka Doncic, if you're starting young guards, you're probably going to lose. It's just the way the game is played. And Orlando's feeling that right now. With Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, They're an intriguing team, though, because they do have some nice players there, including those two, but they also have Franz Wagner. They have Markelle Fultz, who was injured, came back this year. Jonathan Isaac had a setback in his rehab, but he's still around. He'll be back. Wendell Carter's really stepped up his play this year, shooting the three ball really, really well. So a lot of credit to him for his development. I do like Chuma Okeke as well defensively. So Orlando's got some nice players. They've got some flexibility in this draft. But second overall here, I think the no-brainer thing here, if you're Orlando, you already feel like you have the scoring output with, Suggs and Franz Wagner. They're very confident in what they have. So you're going to go ahead here and look for a player like Chet Holmgren, someone who has just been around winning and was actually the high school teammate to your guard and 5th overall pick last year, Jalen Suggs. Two of them played together at Minnehaha Academy in Minnesota. And I think Holmgren here to Orlando does make a lot of sense. It was specifically because you have Wendell Carter. You have a big who can bruise down there. So now you bring in an intriguing, electrifying 4-man who can play off of him, gives you more length and size, gets you way better defensively, gives you a pick and pop machine, gives you someone who can handle the ball as well. I mean, he's got guard and forward skill, so it's not crazy to say he's going to be a long-term power forward in the league, specifically when you have a solid center around him who also has a nice skill set, can play a little bit of high-low with them. We've seen how effective Holmgren can be in that type of system with how good he is as a passer. Get him the ball at the elbow. He's going to be able to get it down low to Wendell Carter. So there's good optionality here for Orlando. And with their kind of traffic jam at the point guard spot, I think that considering Chet Holmgren over Jaden Ivey does make a lot of sense here. Moving on to pick 3, we've got the Detroit Pistons. Pistons fans, welcome to the channel. I know how much the NBA draft does matter to you guys. So if you want to have a spot to really enjoy NBA draft content, this is the place. This is the best spot you can be. I spend endless hours watching these prospects and also putting together mocks and scouting profiles. So make sure to leave the like on today's video and also subscribe, Pistons fans, if you're new. So I think you're going to like this pick here, and it's guard Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, my favorite player in this year's class, and I have him going to Detroit. GM Troy Weaver made a great decision last year going with Cade Cunningham. I know a lot of people thought that was the obvious #1 selection. There was some noise for Jalen Green, but he stuck true to what he should have done and taken Cade Cunningham. And I'm glad he did, because now you get another guard next to Cade in Jaden Ivey, and you have some decent size here. Jaden Ivey's about 6'4", so he's not even undersized at the point guard spot. Cade Cunningham is big enough to be a small forward, so you could play him at shooting guard and be just fine. And the two of them are going to take turns being your primary ball handler, and I think that's one of the bigger issues in Detroit right now. I know Killian Hayes has looked a little bit better this season than he was last year, but let's be honest about Killian Hayes. He's going to go down as a bust. Killian Hayes just not the guy, and I did rake on Troy Weaver for that selection, but he does deserve some credit for the other selections he made. Saddiq Bey, I do like him a lot. He's a nice wing in this league. Then also Isaiah Stewart, I think, is a quality center in this league. So the fact that you now are going to have Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, and Saddiq Bey, you have a nice young quartet of players that I think could probably make a little bit of noise out east, specifically because of what Jaden Ivey can be as a player. Everyone knows how fast he is, but I think the biggest thing about his development and what we saw really in March Madness before their run ended to St. Peter's was his ability to slow the game down now. I think he's really grown as a playmaker and also as a driver of the basketball. He, is a little bit more contained in his movement. And I think that's something that makes him a little bit more similar to Ja Morant even now. He has the similar speed and burst and bounce that Ja Morant has. But at the same time, the game's slowing down for him. He can read the floor a little bit easier. He's got a little bit more containment when finishing around the rim. Has a few actual go-to moves now that he didn't have as a freshman. So I think Jaden Ivey, I have him going 3rd here in this mock draft, but for me, he's the best player in this year's class, and I think Detroit comes out really, really good if they get Ivey here at 3. Number 4, Oklahoma City Thunder here now on the board, and they get a really good player here as well. I mean, the top 4 is so strong this year. I feel like I've had so many different iterations of how the top 4 goes. And it's just because of how talented they are. There's no obvious, this has to be the #1 guy this year, because of how talented all 4 of them are. 4th here, I have Jabari Smith, and it's very possible he could be the 1st overall pick yet. But in this mock, I have him going 4th, a little bit less momentum going into the offseason here for Jabari Smith, just because Auburn lost a little earlier and, maybe didn't have the best final game that he would have hoped for. But Jabari Smith's a really great player. And the thing I like about him specifically in Oklahoma City, as it gives you another scorer to take the load off of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But his play style is not going to clash with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in terms of he's going to be willing to play off the ball. He doesn't need to dribble the ball a ton, whereas Banchero likes to dribble a little bit more. Chet Holmgren, not quite the scorer. Jaden Ivey would want to have the ball in his hands. I think Jabari Smith's actually a really good fit here into Oklahoma City because of how his play style would mesh with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I think he also fits really well with Josh Giddey, who is obviously a phenomenal pickup from last year's draft. Oklahoma City needs some more size, and they get it here with Jabari Smith, who can be a weak side rim protector with some good length and athleticism. But he also projects to be a really good perimeter defender at the NBA level because of that length and size. He moves his feet really well as well laterally. So I think Jabari Smith, a very good option here for Oklahoma City. I know Thunder fans are going to be hoping to get the first overall pick. And I think if the Thunder land the first overall pick, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do because they have all these options. And I think Jabari Smith, they still would strongly consider first overall. Pick 5, Indiana is on the board now. They have moved back up into the 5th pick. For a while, they did have a better record than Sacramento. So they were actually going to be picking behind Sacramento, but now it's flipped back. Indiana back to pick 5. Of course, Rick Carlisle missed some time due to personal reasons. They didn't win very many games during that stretch. But here now at 5, I think it's clear here. Bennedict Mathurin, I'm pretty sure he's cemented himself as the 5th overall player in this year's class. I had projected that all year long. I've always been looking at Ben Mathurin as the 5th best player in this year's class, and I think it's true. And I think his tournament backed that up. He had a 30-point performance and has had some really big games. That poster dunk he had is really what got a lot of people to notice him. But let's be honest about it. He's been performing at that level all season for Arizona. He was their best player. Obviously, there was no one even close to him on that team. And they had a really great season. They were ranked top 5 in the nation pretty consistently. And he's the main reason why. For me, the thing I like about him is when he has the ball, he's very deadly in a lot of different areas. He can get to the rim consistently. He's slithery enough to get by guys on the perimeter and blow by people with his athleticism, but he also is a good enough jump shooter where off the bounce he can take a 25 elevated pull-up jump shot and knock it down. So for him, he's very, very deadly once he gets the ball in his hands. One thing I would like to see from him a little bit more is I'd like to see him cut with more regularity and a little bit more consistency. When he doesn't have the ball, he does a little bit too much standing for me, but I think once he gets into the NBA, there's a little bit more spacing. I think, a coach and coaching staff's going to tell him, hey, if you want more minutes and you want more production, you have to cut. And if he starts doing that, he becomes really deadly with that athleticism. So I think Indiana here gets a really nice player to pair with Chris Duarte and Tyrese Halliburton. My guess is Malcolm Brogdon probably gets traded this offseason. We could see the Pacers have multiple first-round picks. They already have 2. We'll see if they could end up with 3 or 4 with some of the moves that they could still make moving forward. Pick 6, the Sacramento Kings here now. And the Kings obviously were trying to win when they made the Domantas Sabonis deal. Hasn't quite worked out for them, but they're still in a good situation because they do have a top 10 pick here to add to their core. You bring in a guy who's been 2-time All-Star in Domantas Sabonis, and you still have a top 10 pick to pair to it as well. De'Aaron Fox's numbers have been better as well since the Tyrese Halliburton trade. And here I have him going with forward AJ Griffin out of Duke, specifically because of one skill, his 3-point shooting. The one thing I didn't like about the Halliburton Domantas Sabonis swap for Sacramento is if you're bringing in Domantas Sabonis, you'd probably like to have a good amount of shooting around him because of how well he play makes out of the post. And they happened to trade their 2 best jump shooters in Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield in that deal. So that was a little questionable for me. I'm on the train that I think Tyrese Halliburton's really, really good. So Sacramento fans, I'm sorry. I know you guys are a little sad about seeing him go, but here's a nice way to recover. You bring in a guy who shoots nearly 50% from 3 on catch and shoot scenarios this year for Duke. Also has already shown signs of being able to use an escape dribble to get his shot off laterally. And is someone who I think has a lot of room to grow as well. I think the potential is very high for AJ Griffin. You look at his physical frame. I mean, he kind of, compares fairly well to a guy like DeAndre Hunter, who was a top 5 pick in his own class. So AJ Griffin here, I think, is going to be able to guard multiple positions, gives you someone who's willing to cut, but specifically is going to knock down a ton of 3-pointers, and that's huge for Sacramento. Moving on to 7, the Portland Trailblazers here now. They do have 2 picks in the lottery as of right now, but if the Pelicans keep winning, it's possible they could make it to the playoffs and knock, maybe this Portland pick back over to a different team here, because Portland, it is top 14 unprotected, so anywhere from 5 to 14. This pick, though, does come from Portland itself. It says this is their own pick, and I have him going with forward Keegan Murray here out of Iowa. He's a player that's interesting to mock here, specifically because he does a lot of his scoring in different ways. He's not really a go-to scorer type, but what he does is he rebounds the basketball well. He's going to hit the offensive glass. You can post him up. You can have him catch and shoot on the three-point line. He can operate in the mid-range game a little bit. Probably doesn't have a go-to move yet, but that's kind of good because he's scoring 22 points a game without having a go-to move. So for me with Keegan Murray, you're just adding a really good player. And I think during the NBA draft process, people are going to look and say, well, what's his greatest strength? And I think that's opportunistic scoring, which, when you have Damian Lillard on the team, you probably don't need a go-to scorer. You need guys who can be opportunistic. And I think Keegan Murray does make a lot of sense here. Play him at power forward gives you a little bit more strength in the lineup. And I've been to a Blazers game this season. Okay, he's going to be better than Keljin Blevins. So Portland fans, you at least have to smile about that one, because Keljin Blevins is probably one of the worst players I've ever seen play in person. And I think Keegan Murray would instantly become a worthwhile starter in the league. Number 8, now we got the San Antonio Spurs. They're a team with multiple picks in this year's draft as well. So this year's draft, very interesting because we've got multiple teams with multiple picks. So it becomes a little interesting to see how this whole thing could shake out and shape up. So 8 here, I have San Antonio going with guard Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin. Now, Spurs fans, before you get upset and say, that's not what we need. We don't need a guard. We need a 4. I get it. But at the same time, Johnny Davis falls to 8. He's the best player available here. And you also did lose DeMar DeRozan last offseason, and he's having a great year in Chicago. And you, quite frankly, really need another guard to come in and replace him. I know you guys like Lonnie Walker. I know you like the backcourt you have. I love DeJounte Murray. But Johnny Davis just makes too much sense here. If he's available at 8, the Spurs should run this up to the podium. I did think about Jalen Duren as well here, but ideally, Johnny Davis, I think, is just the better option. I think he's probably going to have a better career. Maybe he's a go-to scorer. Reminds me a little bit of Rodney Stuckey, which I know might scare some people, but at the same time, I think he's got that gamer element to him where he's going to make big plays consistently. And I think that's a huge thing to actually look at, is when someone rises to the occasion, it is very important to view that as a plus. Even when they do have certain weaknesses, I think Johnny Davis, someone who can be a nice go-to option for a team down the road. Pick 9. This is the New Orleans Pelicans, and this is one of those big shakeups I'm talking about. The Lakers pick, top 10, it goes to the Pelicans, and 11th to 30, it goes to Memphis. So the Grizzlies, if you're a Grizzlies fan, you're like, oh no, this isn't good. Lakers, you guys got to start winning. Oh my goodness, because we want your pick. But at the same time here, the Pelicans are really, really happy with this, because you think about what happened. They made a deal for CJ McCollum, gave up their pick here. That is from 5 to 14 going to go to Portland. And you have to say, well, wow, they're going to end up with no lottery picks here. But then this happens where they overtake the Lakers in the standings, push the Lakers down into the top 10, and then probably get that selection. So that's huge for New Orleans here. And with this selection, they're going to go with guard Ty Washington out of Kentucky. Picking for New Orleans is tough, because you have to look at the big man spot and say, well, they like Jonas Valanciunas. They like Jackson Hayes, who's having a pretty solid season this year. You have Zion Williamson, you have Brandon Ingram, you have CJ McCollum, you also have Devontae Graham. It's like, what do you really need? They also last year drafted Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. So they've got a ton of good players. So it's like, what do they really need here? I went with more of a true point guard who can facilitate an offense. Obviously they're going to do the Zion Williamson at point guard thing. They're also going to let CJ McCollum play a little bit of point guard. But ideally, long-term here, you get another guard in here who can handle the ball. I just don't believe Kyra Lewis is going to ever really fit into the NBA as a long-term option. So for me, Ty Washington makes some sense here for New Orleans. This is an example of, I don't really know what to mock here quite yet, just because New Orleans is pretty good with their roster. And had Zion Williamson been healthy this year, they probably would have had a better record. But holistically here for New Orleans, after the CJ McCollum trade, they just don't have a lot of needs. So the fact that they have a top 10 pick, maybe they go into the marketplace and try and trade this. But I think Ty Washington is a pretty good pickup here for New Orleans. Didn't have the tournament he was hoping to, obviously, after St. Peter's upset Kentucky in the round of 64. But I still think that, his whole body of work has some nice upside to it. He is only a freshman, so, there's a lot of room to grow yet for him. And I think New Orleans gets a pretty solid player here. Pick 10, Washington Wizards now on the board. And this is one that I've been consistently mocking because I do really, really like this. I know some people are a little bit lower on this player than I am, but I think he's a top 10 pick still, and that's guard Shaedon Sharpe from the G League Ignite. I know a lot of people, some people are, and some experts in quotes there, aren't even having him in the top 20. That's ridiculous to me. If I'm a GM and I have a selection, I'm sorry, there's no way I'm not taking this guy over certain players after this pick because he is way too athletic, way too gifted as a scorer to not take him in the lottery. That is just out of the question to me. If he's not a lottery pick, that is brutal because his upside is immense. Now, don't get me wrong, his floor is really low, but here for Washington, if you have any inkling or reservations that Bradley Beal might leave, you need someone who could really develop and take his position, and that is Shaedon Sharpe. And the thing is, if Bradley Beal stays, Shaedon Sharpe projects to be a phenomenal bench scorer in the NBA. Jordan Clarkson's a fairly decent floor for him. Probably a little bit lower floor than actual Jordan Clarkson. But think about Jordan Clarkson when he was not in Utah, when he was, maybe over in Cleveland. Jordan Clarkson's floor is lower than how he's been playing as well. So that's kind of what I mean here too with Shaedon Sharpe. I still think he's going to have a really nice career in the NBA, and I think there's some real star upside here with him. 2-3 years down the road, if he's averaging 18 to 20 points a game, I wouldn't be completely shocked. Now, that 18 to 20 is probably going to come with a little bit of, inefficiency, but at the same time, I think Washington just needs another guy they can go to as a scorer. They tried it with Spencer Dinwiddie. That just quite frankly didn't work. So for me, with Shaedon Sharpe, I do think it does make some sense here to consider him pick 10. Pick 11, we got the New York Knicks now. And at this spot, I'm pretty interested in what Knicks fans think they need, because I've mocked a variety of things. The Knicks fans never seem to be happy about it, so which is kind of funny to me. They never really know what they want there in New York. What I got the Knicks here going with is guard Dyson Daniels from G League Ignite. He makes a big move here in this mock draft from where I had him last week. And part of the reason why is, considering his frame and where his skill set is right now, I could see a team getting excited about a bigger point guard who has some good playmaking feel and can finish around the rim fairly well. For me, the biggest issue, though, is he just does not shoot the three ball well at all. I am much lower on this kid than everybody else. I'm going to be honest about it. Knicks fans, maybe you're excited about this one. I wouldn't be, but I am just mocking what I think could happen, not what I would necessarily do. Dyson Daniels this year in G League Ignite shot 25% from three. So, a lot of people like to make fun of Ben Simmons. A lot of people like to make fun of guards who can't shoot the basketball. And yet everyone's clamoring for Dyson Daniels to be a lottery pick. He shot 25% from three this year in the G League. Okay. So, I don't like this player as much as everyone else seems to. I am much lower on him than everyone else. And I thought, this guy probably shouldn't be a lottery pick, but I could see why some people maybe would consider him that way, specifically when you look at his size. He does hit some big shots. Even with his inefficiency from three, he did hit a few clutch ones for G League Ignite this year. So, maybe that's what people are seeing. If you watch the film on him and specifically highlights, he looks better in highlights than he actually does in games. So that's the situation here with Dyson Daniels. I think the Knicks do need a point guard. I understand the want for a bigger point guard in Dyson Daniels. I'm just not sure if I would actually make this selection if I was Leon Rose. Pick 12, Blazers here again. This pick comes from the New Orleans Pelicans, and I have him going here with forward/center Jalen Duren, which is an intriguing pickup here for me if I'm Portland. A player who didn't have the game he was hoping to have against Gonzaga. Memphis went toe-to-toe with them, and had Jalen Duren had a better game, they maybe could have pulled that one out. And that would have been huge for Jalen Duren's stock. The only issue in that game is he got in foul trouble, and Chet Holmgren, solidified himself as the better big man prospect in that one. It was a real opportunity for Duren, couldn't capitalize on it, and he falls now a little bit even further than he's been falling in my mock, down to 11 here with the Blazers. And I do think this is still pick 12, with the Blazers, which I still think is a pretty good pickup here for Portland. It gives you another big man. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with Jusuf Nurkic. He did not get an extension done. He's going to be a free agent, but they do have his bird rights. They could probably keep him around if they want to. I think the Blazers are going to look around for trades as well. I think this pick could potentially be on the move this offseason, so we'll see exactly what Portland wants to do with it. But here I have Jalen Duren going. I think he's a pretty good fit as well. Gives you another big body who can screen and roll. They had hoped Zach Collins could be this, and of course, just never been healthy. So Jalen Duren, after Zach Collins heads to San Antonio this past offseason, Duren has a defined role coming into Portland. Pick 13, we got the Atlanta Hawks here now. In Atlanta, with this spot on the board, I think they need more defense, specifically someone who can protect the rim a little bit when Clint Capella's off the floor, gives you a flexible, versatile four-man, and that's EJ Liddell out of Ohio State. Gives you some flexibility as well with the cap space situation. They have a lot of good players there. In Atlanta, they have a lot of guys that, you look at and say, wow, this guy probably deserves a pretty good payday. And I'm not sure if Atlanta's going to be able to give it to everyone. They gave it to Herter already. They gave it to Bogdanovich in free agency. They gave Trae Young the bag. They gave John Collins the bag. Clint Capella's making pretty good money. Then you also have Onyeka Okongwu, who's going to want to get paid. DeAndre Hunter's going to want to get paid. They already traded Cam Reddish because he was going to want to get paid. So here, EJ Liddell, pretty good pickup. It helps you defensively. Again, Atlanta's one of those situations where they have real traffic jam at certain positions. I did consider a point guard here. Specifically, I considered Kennedy Chandler from Tennessee. The only thing with Atlanta, though, is Kennedy Chandler as a year one guy. I think Sharif Cooper in year two is probably more ready to come in and take a role in that offense off the bench. So we'll see if we do see Sharif Cooper more next season. But I do think Kennedy Chandler could be potentially in play if they're not high on Sharif Cooper's upside. Pick 14, Charlotte Hornets here now. And just like last week, this is one of those where, I just feel like this is right, and I'm not going to change something for change's sake. I think that it's going to be Walker Kessler out of Auburn. They were badly hunting for a rim-protecting center at the NBA trade deadline. They were linked to Jakob Poeltl. I know that they brought in Montrezl Harrell. I don't care. I just don't think that Montrezl Harrell should be impacting who you draft in the lottery, especially not in the year 2022. He's not a six man of the year candidate anymore. He's not that guy anymore. Walker Kessler is that guy. He can protect the rim. Really, really good defensive player. He shoots very well from the field as well because he takes smart shots. He shoots around the rim. He's also showing a little bit of willingness to shoot the three ball. Hasn't really connected as frequently as you would like to. But at the same point, there's players who came out of college without shooting any threes that have developed a three-point shot. Walker Kessler has shot a few. So it points to pretty good upward trajectory here for Walker Kessler and his ability to shoot the three ball at the next level. If he gets that down, he's going to be a nice fit. I know some people are going to say, well, we drafted Kai Jones too. Okay, you want to draft a point guard? You have LaMelo Ball. You want to draft a shooting guard? You took Book Knight before you took Kai Jones last year. Small forward, you have Miles Bridges, you have Gordon Hayward. Do you really want a small forward? You know what I mean? I think center here is the one that makes the most sense. Walker Kessler out of Auburn. You need a big who can protect the rim, specifically if LaMelo Ball is your point guard. And I think that's a really good pairing here in Charlotte. 15, Oklahoma City Thunder here. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Clippers, and we're going with a different direction in this mock. Last week I gave him Ousmane Dieng, but this guy's been a huge riser. Center Mark Williams out of Duke is now the fourth center off the board here, and I think there's legitimacy to him even maybe passing Walker Kessler at some point because of his athleticism. He is very, very intriguing as a center, and he would actually be the third center if you consider Chet Holmgren a forward like I mocked him in this draft. Mark Williams has really helped himself this March Madness. Has been playing phenomenally in his role. He's been great all season long for Duke, but I think really now he's getting more of that notoriety and notice from media that he's going to be a good player in the NBA. And for me, Oklahoma City, look at this team. After being able to go get Jabari Smith, you already addressed one of the front court spots. You need to get a center. You need to. If you have any hopes of seriously winning within the next year or two, you have to draft a center. You just can't have Derek Favors and nothing behind him as your center moving forward. Mark Williams instantly would become a starter day one in Oklahoma City. He just would be the best center on the roster, in my opinion. And he's a very athletic big as well. He can rim run, protect the rim on the defensive end of the floor, gives you a little bit of a stalwart defensively. Oklahoma City gets way better with this selection. Adding Jabari Smith and Mark Williams in one draft makes you way, way better. So here for Oklahoma City, I do really like the long-term outlook for them now. If you consider Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, Jabari Smith, and Mark Williams, they're starting five for the future. That's a pretty good combination there. You have Trey Mann off the bench. They still have some more work to do, but they do have a lot more assets to do it as well. So I think Oklahoma City, if you want to start winning more games, which I think that should be the goal for every single team during the NBA draft, Mark Williams is the guy. Pick 16, Houston Rockets here. This pick comes from the Brooklyn Nets. And at this spot, I have them going with forward Jeremy Sohan from Baylor. One thing about Houston is they're just one of the worst defensive teams in the league. When you look at this team, and this is what I'm talking about with young guards as well, they just don't have what they need to have in order to be the best, a great defensive team. You know, a lot of people like Jae'Sean Tate. I like Jae'Sean Tate coming from the NBL. I thought that was a really good move for them, bringing him in as a signing after he went undrafted. It made a lot of sense to me, and he's been a pretty good find for them. But at the same time, you know, he's probably their best defensive player that they've been starting, and that's just not going to get it done. Let's be honest. So forward Jeremy Sochan here from Baylor, he's a defensive specialist, can guard 1 through 5. He is going to be one of those few players who you could literally trust on a post, and then you could have him go guard a point guard the very next play. That just doesn't happen. That is so rare. Reminds me of Dennis Rodman. And it's not just the hair over there. It's his capability to really be flexible defensively. Now, he's not the rebounder that Rodman was, not even close to it. But I do think he has a little bit more offensive upside. He's a little bit more willing as a scorer than Rodman ever was. The one thing here with Sochan, though, is he's not a talented scorer yet. He's got a lot of development to go in Houston. But remember, I had him take Paulo Banchero, who's going to help them defensively, but specifically offensively. You have KPJ, you have Jalen Green, you have Alperen Şengün, who's a pretty good offensive post-up player. You don't need to go with another offensive guy here. You need to get way better defensively, and Jeremy Sochan is a Swiss Army knife on that end of the floor. 17, we got the Indiana Pacers here again. They went with Ben Mathurin, pick 5. And now at pick 17, it's interesting here what they could consider to do. At this spot, I have him going with forward Kendall Brown from Baylor. So last week had him go a little bit lower, and I came around on that and said, man, probably a little bit too low. Didn't have a good tournament by any stretch of the imagination, but I still think for a guy I was mocking consistently in the lottery, shouldn't have him fall into the 20s probably should be around that 16 to 19 mark probably. And this week he falls 17 to Indiana. So I think Indiana here, after you bring in Ben Mathurin, you get another wing, and you bring in another wing here who's pretty talented, and Kendall Brown can play the 3 or 4. And I think the perfect title for him is connector. He's a connector piece for a team. He's someone who's going to be able to catch in the corner, attack a closeout, make the right read, either lob it up to a big, which Miles Turner's going to be happy about, or he's going to be able to kick it out to a 3-point shooter. He's also able to knock down open jump shots himself. Maybe has a little bit of playmaking point forward to him. Probably wouldn't bet on it near year 1 or year 2, but maybe down the road he could be used as a guy you tie to your bench unit, keep him in with the starters, and then when the bench unit comes in, you keep him on the floor and let him take probably a little bit bigger offensive role. That's something that I could see working out for him. I think he'd be a phenomenal fit into what Rick Carlisle likes to do, and I think that's a huge thing here for Indiana, is they had to reshape this whole thing around Rick Carlisle's system, and they've done a good job of it so far. I think Halliburton was a phenomenal find for them in that. And I also do think that Miles Turner is a perfect center for Rick Carlisle's system. So now it's about trying to find other pieces around those guys. And Kendall Brown is one of those players that I just think connects well into the NBA. 18, we got San Antonio here again. Remember, they went with guard Johnny Davis with their first selection. And now at 18, this pick comes from Toronto in the Thaddeus Young trade. And I have them looking at forward Tari Eason, same as last week. And again, this is an example of don't change something just for change's sake. Tari Eason, a very raw forward, one that I am lower on than everybody else. I will be honest with you guys about that. But he has some face-up 4 qualities. And Spurs fans, if you're looking for an athletic 4, here you go. You got one of the more athletic players in the class, has some offensive versatility to him. He is raw still. I don't know if he's going to be able to score consistently in the NBA in year 1, but I do think he has some projectable upside, specifically because of his physical athleticism. He's big, lengthy, strong, and his decision to transfer to LSU after his freshman season in Cincinnati was huge. He put himself on the map. He's going to be a first-round pick more than likely now. I see San Antonio taking advantage of it here. You go with Johnny Davis, you get best player available in the top 10. And then at 18, you find that forward that you've been craving, and Tari Eason, a really good selection. Pick 19, we got the Minnesota Timberwolves here now, and a team that's pretty interesting to me. And for them, I'm going with forward Ochai Agbaji. And the reason why here is I think that they do need to consolidate their depth a little bit more and just get a really good player in here. And Ochai Agbaji is that. Now, for me, I'm not as in love with Agbaji as everyone else, but I do see why he would have a pretty nice role in the NBA. He knocks down open jump shots. He attacks closeouts well, and defensively, he's capable. So if you're looking at Minnesota here, this is way better than a Kogi. This is way better than Jake Layman. I mean, your wing depth gets just better here. For a team that's in the playoffs now, you want to try and build in some depth to the rest of the roster. The Wolves continue to get lucky every year in the lottery, and it seems like every other year they're picking first overall. But now that they're a playoff team, it's about trying to add in depth and wing talent around your stars. And I think Agbaji here is a really good example of that. Pick 20, Chicago Bulls here now. And at this spot, the Bulls, there's a few things you can consider. They're kind of in a tailspin as of late. Just haven't ended the season as they started. Of course, the injuries are a big part of that. When they missed Caruso for a while, that obviously hurt their team. Lonzo Ball's absence has hurt this team as well. So the Bulls, they have some work to do to try and get back on track here. But with their selection, I have them going with forward Nikola Jovic out of Serbia. Another example here of a team making a jump into the playoffs and realizing they just probably don't have the depth behind their starters that they would like to have. Nikola Jovic here, I think, is a very intriguing connecting piece as well. Reminds me of Kendall Brown in his ability to do a lot of different things on the floor. He can shoot the ball well from three. He can attack closeouts well. He can actually be a little bit of a ball handler. He's further ahead than Kendall Brown in the ball handling department. He's a better passer than Kendall Brown as well. So I thought there was some legitimacy to Kendall Brown maybe going here with, Nikola Jovic being picked 17 to Indiana. But ultimately, overseas players tend to get looked at a little bit less. So Nikola Jovic falls behind Kendall Brown here just because of exposure issues with the NBA. I'm going to be honest, I watch more of these players than any NBA GM does. So I know about these guys more than GMs do. And Nikola Jovic, I think, is a really good player. I think that just the fact that he's an overseas player probably doesn't give him as much exposure as he deserves. For a while, I thought he could be a lottery pick, but some other guys get more momentum throughout this March Madness process, and it actually ends up hurting these overseas players just a little bit. Think about Alperen Şengün last year. Didn't even go in the lottery, and I thought he could have been a top 10 player in the class just with how talented he was and how good his film looked. So again, Nikola Jovic here, someone who has really good film and I think will work very well in the NBA. 21, Denver Nuggets here now on the board. And for me with Denver here, it's about trying to find more talent, and they get it here with a player I love. This player should be a lottery pick. He absolutely should be. As guard Hugo Besson from the NBL. He plays for the New Zealand Breakers. And if you want someone to be an offensive unit by himself, this is the guy, okay? And if I was coaching in the NBA right now, I would get Hugo Besson in a heartbeat because he is a little bit like Duncan Robinson. Think about what Duncan Robinson does for the Miami Heat's offense. The fact that he is just such a threat that he gets guarded 27 feet away from the hoop. Hugo Besson's got some of those same qualities to him. He's the best shooter in this year's class, strictly from the trajectory of being a shooter. He's going to come in and be a marksman. And the one thing I like about him is not only can he shoot the basketball, but he can create for himself off the bounce. He can create for others off the bounce a little bit, which is where Duncan Robinson has really developed since playing at Michigan to where he currently is as a Miami Heat player. Besson's ready. Besson can come in and play meaningful minutes right now. He's pretty rough defensively, doesn't move his feet very well, and has a tendency to put his hands on guys. So he's going to pick up some ticky-tack fouls from here and there just because he, uses his hands a little bit too frequently defensively to try and bail him out. But here with Hugo Besson, this guy is going to be an offensive weapon. And if you want to find someone to put around Nikola Jokic, Hugo Besson's the perfect player here. Denver drafts so well. The fact that they stole Bones Highland in the 20s last year was insane to me. I saw him as a potential lottery level player, and he's looked that part a little bit this year with Denver. The fact that Hugo Besson's still here, I just trust that, Tim Connolly's going to get the job done and make the right pick, and that's Hugo Besson here from New Zealand. 22, Memphis Grizzlies here. This pick comes from the Utah Jazz from the Mike Conley trade. And with this spot here, now instead of having 3 picks, they only have 2 in this draft, but I'm having them go with guard Kennedy Chandler. And the theme here for me with Memphis, you'll see it after the second selection as well, is try and replace the veterans that you're probably going to lose due to salary cap reasons. Those guys are Kyle Anderson and Tyus Jones. And here you get a really solid player in Kennedy Chandler, who's a phenomenal fit into what Memphis needs. They need another ball handler off the bench, specifically once Tyus Jones is gone. And Kennedy Chandler, he's starting to figure it out as of late. He's able to get downhill whenever he wants. Now, he needs to start doing that with more consistency. He needs to realize he can beat literally every single player at the collegiate level off the dribble. Didn't really seem to figure that out until the tournament. But once he figured it out, he was dynamic and awesome. So I think here for Memphis, if you can add in a player who, once Ja Morant comes out of the game, can keep some of that, same pressure on the rim, can get downhill, can kick out to the shooters, it gives you a little bit more offensive consistency. I know the Grizzlies have been great when Ja Morant hasn't played, and part of the reason is Tyus Jones. But realistically, Tyus is going to want a bigger contract, and the Grizzlies are going to have to prioritize John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane. They're probably going to want to try and keep Zaire Williams long-term. And then also we'll see what happens with Steven Adams, but they've got guys they have to pay there. So I think the salary cap comes into play here for Memphis, and you get a really good option here in Kennedy Chandler, who is maybe worth a lottery pick even. Pick 23, my Dallas Mavericks on the board here now. Dallas has been awesome defensively this season. Jason Kidd deserves a lot of credit for that. He's one of the best defensive coaches in the league because he, just understands that he was a great on-ball defender himself in the NBA. And I think now specifically he's helping out the Mavericks immensely become a better defensive team. And here I'm going to try and help him out a little bit more with that. I'm going to go with forward/guard Ron Harper Jr. from Rutgers. Mavericks fans, if you want to know more about Ron Harper Jr., I do have a scouting profile up on the channel. It's about 20 minutes long, so I go into really deep depth with some game clips of Ron Harper Jr., so make sure to go check that out on the channel. But Ron Harper Jr. here for me, I like this a lot. He's a player who can create his shot a little bit more. So, when with the Mavs here, you have Ron Harper, you add Ron Harper Jr. to a wing collection of Reggie Bullock and Dorian Finney-Smith. So he fits right in defensively. One of the better defensive players in this year's class. But what he has over DFS and Reggie Bullock is a little bit more of a creator, can finish around the rim probably a little bit more consistently with his frame. And I think also is probably a little bit more consistent of a mid-range shooter. So if you're looking for a guy here who can get to the rim, adds a little bit more of an element to your offense, which is really where the Mavericks have lagged behind. You do that here, but it also doesn't come at the cost of your defense. So Ron Harper Jr. really helped solidify that third forward spot for me coming off the bench. Also Josh Green. So you have some pretty good rotation pieces now. And I think Ron Harper Jr. very deserving of this selection. Pick 24, Brooklyn Nets here. This pick comes from the Philadelphia 76ers in the James Harden deal. And with this pick, I have him going with forward Patrick Baldwin from Milwaukee. The biggest thing here for me is I just want them to add more shooting around Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons. If you can keep, more consistent shooters who offer some length and size, like Patrick Baldwin does, it does make you a threat. Now, Patrick Baldwin, I'm not high on him. I could see him slipping into the second round, but here with Brooklyn, I think that the need for a shooter does make a lot of sense, specifically considering the fact that, come playoff time, you probably play Ben Simmons as your 5, Kevin Durant as your 4. And if you want to throw a little bit more size out on the floor, you'd probably throw Patrick Baldwin as the 3, Kyrie as the 1, and then probably Seth Curry as the 2. So you have, 3 guys who are about 6'10" and up. And then you also have your 2 smalls in Curry and Kyrie. So we'll see exactly what Brooklyn looks to do. But I think that, adding a shooter here with some good size and length does make some sense. Even if he's not the best player at this spot, I do think that his projectable trait, which is shooting, does really matter here when you have Ben Simmons on your roster. Pick 25, Milwaukee Bucks here now. And this pick, another one where I'm not going to just change it to change it. This is one that I feel very confident in. If he's available, I think Milwaukee would take him. And that's guard Max Christie from Michigan State. Didn't quite have the season he would have loved to have based off of efficiency. But what he is a pretty lengthy guard who I think has some real upside here. He's been dangerous with the ball in his hands and just knows how to play without it as well. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Chris Middleton, not quite to the same degree, but someone who I think has some real long-term upside and projectability in the NBA because of where he's at as a player. Didn't really get to play with the ball in his hands a ton for the Spartans this past year, but when he had it, he made some things happen and he showed some really good flashes of being a solid player. There's some other guys you could consider here, maybe Malachi Branham from Ohio State, but I think that Max Christie here makes a ton of sense. They trade Dante DiVincenzo. They need to bring in another rotational guard, and for me, Max Christie fits the bill. 26, Miami Heat here now on the board, and they have a good collection of guards, so I'm not really worried about the guard position for this team. But what I do want to add is a forward who offers some physicality and kind of fits the Heat culture, and that's Trevor Keels from Duke. He is an NBA-ready body. I mean, look at his frame. He's extremely strong. He's ready to guard NBA-level players on day 1 of his NBA career, and he shoots the 3 ball fairly well. So he's going to do the things you want him to do when he's playing off the ball. Now, offensively, I don't know if he's going to help Miami's offense a ton, but what he does do is give you another consistent rotational defender, which is huge for Eric Spoelstra's system. And then Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, those are the offensive weapons there in Miami. It's about trying to put defense around those guys. Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler as well. Jimmy's not having quite the offensive season we're used to him having, but I think overall Miami's strength is their defense, and they get even better here. 27, San Antonio Spurs, their third pick of the first round. Johnny Davis, Tari Eason, those have been their other two selections. And with this one here, we're going to go with another player who projectable and is ready to play right now, and that's forward Wendell Moore Jr. from Duke. And the one thing about him from his sophomore to junior season, the transition this year has been immense because he's done more playmaking. For a lot of the season, Duke played without a true point guard in their starting lineup. So Wendell Moore Jr. by default had to do a little bit more playmaking, and he showed that he was pretty solid at it. Actually, and I think that has really helped his draft stock. Before the season, he was probably going to be around pick 45, and then really has stepped up his play now into a first-round level selection. And San Antonio gets a little bit more size here. He's NBA ready. I mean, look at his frame as well. Just like Trevor Keels, this guy's ready for the NBA. He is a little bit older than Keels, which is why I opted for Keels first in this mock draft to Miami, and then Wendell Moore Jr. here afterward to the San Antonio Spurs. But if you're the Spurs here, considering what you got, Johnny Davis, you get Tari Eason and Wendell Moore Jr., really good collection of players. And I think overall here for San Antonio, you have to consider this a win here, being able to pull out these guys. We'll see if Jakob Poeltl stays around. Maybe if they do trade him or have plans on trading him, I could have seen Jalen Duren at pick 8. But overall, I'm pretty happy about this for San Antonio. 28, we got the Golden State Warriors here now, a team that they're in a little bit of flux right now because of the injuries to their stars. But what we've seen from the younger Warriors is they've got a lot of talent and they've got a lot of upside here. And they've shown a history to not be afraid of drafting from G League Ignite, and it paid off big time for them last draft with Jonathan Kuminga, who has looked the part of being a really good NBA player. They're going to do it again here with another forward, Marjon Beauchamp from G League Ignite. A lot of people have been looking at him as a lottery pick. I just don't see it. I think he's a solid forward in the NBA. I think he's got, pretty good skill set to him. He's going to be able to cut off the ball. He's grown as a creator. He's really immensely improved from where he was at as a high school senior. But now, a few years removed from that, his upside maybe isn't the highest, but he does continue to just keep getting better each and every year. And I think if you're Golden State, this is the blend here of adding a player who is probably going to grow a little bit more, consistently get a little bit better year in, year out. He just wants to get better as a basketball player. But at the same time, he's also a little bit more ready than some of the other guys that picked 28. If you're looking for someone who can maybe step into the rotation, take some of those Andre Iguodala minutes down the road, I think Beauchamp could be your guy here, and it does help Golden State maybe extend its championship window a little bit. Pick 29, Memphis Grizzlies here now at this spot. Of course, earlier they went with Kennedy Chandler, and here I'm targeting a replacement here for forward Kyle Anderson. I'm going with forward Julian Strawther from Gonzaga. This is an example of a player who just does everything right. We talked about it with Keegan Murray, who just is opportunistic. Julian Strawther is that to a lesser degree. For Gonzaga, it seems like anytime they needed a basket, all of a sudden he would cut off the wing and find himself for an easy 2-point layup. Or anytime that they needed to hit a huge three, he would catch the ball open in the corner and knock it down. Like, Julian Strawther was just in the right spot at the right time all the time, it felt like. He's also a fairly solid defender. Took a massive jump from his freshman to sophomore season, where he went from starting 0 games to starting every game for Gonzaga. Head coach Mark Few really started to trust him more. And I think that was essential for his rise here into the first round. A lot of people, I think, are lagging behind on this one. Again, I think that Julian Strawther is a first-round level player. A lot of people haven't been seeing him that way, but at this point, I think Memphis does take him here, 29. And then 30 here, the final pick of the first round. Again, if you guys have enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well if you're new. This is the Oklahoma City Thunder. This pick comes from the Chris Paul trade with the Phoenix Suns. Crazy how that trade has impacted the NBA, right? But here, Oklahoma City now at this spot, they're going to go ahead and take guard/forward Ousmane Dieng. So the same guy I had him take 16th last week. I have him go a little bit lower here because I do think there's going to be some question marks about his burst and also his overall athleticism, but also his shooting touch. So for me with Ousmane Dieng, I do like him. He is the teammate of Hugo Besson in the NBL for the New Zealand Breakers. But again, I think the lack of exposure here probably does hurt Ousmane Dieng a little bit. He is a big playmaker though at 6'8". Last year we saw, Sam Presti take Josh Giddey from the NBL, and I think he doubles down on it here, takes another NBL prospect, someone who's a bigger player who can fit as a guard or forward. Ousmane Dieng, I like it. He can lead a second unit, and it does give you a little bit more depth there if you're Oklahoma City specifically with some size. So overall, Oklahoma City, I do think they come out very well in this draft. Jabari Smith, Mark Williams, Ousmane Dieng, you get a good collection of size, skill, and physicality. So for me, I'm overall very happy if I'm an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy today's video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe as well if you're new. You guys know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.